Shedeur Sanders didn't crumble when the Browns sidelined him. He visualized. He prayed. He studied. While others waited to be given reps, he created readiness. Sanders' calm wasn't passive, it was tactical. Even without the spotlight, he conducted himself like the starting quarterback. When his chance finally came, there was no adjustment period, only execution. That maturity, under duress and without assurance, separated him from every rookie in the room. His frustration wasn't about reps, it was about principle.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
In a league where impatience crushes most rookies, Sanders proved that mental preparation is its own form of momentum. His leadership wasn't loud but decisive, lifting teammates, steadying the offense, and giving Cleveland something it lacked: direction. This wasn't accidental growth. It was cultivated, spiritual, disciplined. And it made the organization's early doubt not just questionable, but consequential. This story didn't begin with Shedeur Sanders throwing a touchdown. It didn't start with a highlight play, a big media moment, or even a coaching endorsement. It started with something far more telling: frustration. Controlled, justified, and long overdue. Because when you do everything right, when you lead by example, outperform expectations, carry yourself with maturity, and still get passed over for first-team reps, it's only a matter of time before something cracks. And in Cleveland, that crack came in the form of a confrontation. Not a meltdown. Not an immature outburst. But a calm, assertive challenge from Shedeur to the coaching staff that made it clear: the excuses had run their course. The waiting game was over. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He simply made it undeniable that the status quo was no longer working. And in doing so, he exposed not just a personnel misstep, but a deeper dysfunction. Because the real problem wasn't just that Shedeur wasn't getting reps. It was that the Browns had built a system that didn't know how to recognize leadership unless it looked a certain way. And when it didn't, they treated it like it wasn't there at all. Shedeur's growth had been obvious to everyone except the people making the decisions. He'd been leading without the title, bringing focus without attention, grounding the offense with nothing more than presence. And still, he watched from the sidelines while others struggled through inconsistency. There was no logic to it, only bias. The kind that's baked into most NFL organizations. The kind that sees draft position as a predictor of value instead of a starting point for evaluation. Shedeur was a fifth-round pick. That alone had shaped how Cleveland saw him, regardless of how well he played, how well he prepared, or how composed he stayed under pressure. In their eyes, he was supposed to be developmental. A project. Someone who might get a shot later, after a year or two in the system. But Shedeur didn't need that timeline. From day one, his discipline, confidence, and preparation were obvious. He wasn't waiting to become a leader, he already was. He didn't require extensive support, he was the support system. In a room full of uncertainty, Shedeur was the most stable thing in it. That's what made the coaching staff's hesitation so damaging. They didn't just misread a player. They misread the moment. And when Shedeur confronted them, it forced them to face a truth they weren't ready to see. The player they thought needed time was the one who'd been ready the whole time. And once they gave him the ball, it all changed. The offense shifted. The energy improved. The communication sharpened. There was no learning curve. No growing pains. Just control. Shedeur didn't play like a rookie. He played like the only person on the field who wasn't rattled. He stayed within himself, read the field with clarity, and made smart decisions. It wasn't about flashy throws, it was about executing at a high level in situations where others had failed. That's what real leadership looks like. And it came not from hand-holding or spoon-feeding, but from the kind of inner strength that doesn't get taught. It's built through faith, discipline, and accountability. It's forged in the moments no one sees, long before the cameras ever show up. Shedeur's story is full of those moments. He wasn't the guy getting the most reps, he wasn't the name being hyped in press conferences. But he was the one staying late, visualizing scenarios, studying tape, grounding himself in preparation. He didn't need someone to push him. He pulled himself forward. Every single day. That kind of self-directed focus doesn't just benefit the player. It transforms the entire team. Because when Shedeur stepped into the starting role, it didn't just boost the offense, it stabilized it. Teammates felt the difference. The uncertainty disappeared. Routes were run with more precision. The playbook started flowing. Confidence returned. And none of it was accidental. This wasn't the result of luck or injury. This was what happens when a player who's been overlooked finally gets the opportunity he's been prepared for all along. And now, with Shedeur leading the charge, the Browns look like a team with identity, something they'd lacked for too long. The ripple effect is real. It's in the body language of his teammates, the way they respond to him in the huddle, the way the offensive line trusts him to make the right call, the way the sideline watches when he's under center. But what's equally real is the accountability the Browns have to face. Because this didn't have to take this long. Shedeur didn't magically become a leader overnight. He was showing them who he was from the start. The film was there. The attitude was there. The preparation was always there. The issue was that the people in charge didn't believe what they were seeing because it didn't fit the mold. And that's not just a Cleveland problem. That's a league-wide issue. Draft bias. Pedigree bias. Metrics over mentality. Time and time again, teams get stuck chasing potential while overlooking the players who are already performing like professionals. It's a cycle. And Shedeur broke it, not with noise but with results. He proved that maturity can't be measured by a 40-yard dash. That composure isn't taught in a quarterback room, it's lived. That faith, discipline, and preparation are often more important than pure talent. And for all the talk about player development, Shedeur's development came in the face of being underdeveloped by the organization. He didn't get the support structure most rookies receive. He didn't get consistent reps. He didn't get the tailored coaching plan. What he got was indifference. And he still rose. That's not just perseverance. That's excellence under pressure. That's what separates the guys who survive the league from the ones who shape it. Now, as the Browns begin to pivot toward a new future, the narrative has finally caught up to reality. Shedeur Sanders isn't a nice surprise. He's not a hot streak. He's the guy. And every week he's under center, that truth becomes harder to ignore. There's a lesson in this. For scouts. For GMs. For coaches clinging to old habits. Because Shedeur's story is living proof that the league needs to redefine how it evaluates leadership and toughness. It's not just about tools. It's about temperament. And no stat sheet, draft guide, or combined number could have predicted the impact he'd have once he got his shot. But the signs were always there. The Browns just weren't paying attention, until he forced them to. So now the team has a decision to make. Not just about the depth chart, but about who they want to be going forward. Because with Shedeur under center, they've got something they haven't had in years: stability. And more than that, they've got belief. The offense believes in him. The locker room trusts him. The fans see it. The results speak for themselves. This isn't just about a talented rookie, it's about a team finally finding its center after months of drifting. And all of it started with a quarterback who had every reason to fold, but didn't. If you've been following this journey, you already know what's coming. Hit like if you've been calling this since the preseason. Drop a comment if you think Shedeur's just getting started. And definitely subscribe because we'll be watching every single week as this story keeps unfolding. They tried to bury him behind the depth chart. Now, he's the one calling the shots. And this time he's not giving the ball back. Let's talk about what it really means to snap. Because when Shedeur Sanders finally reached his limit, it wasn't the kind of meltdown people like to dramatize. There were no sideline tantrums. No viral locker room outbursts. No post-practice rants caught on camera. It was more powerful than that. It was the moment when quiet composure met immovable conviction. When the most patient guy in the building finally said, "Enough is enough," and forced everyone in Cleveland's coaching hierarchy to look directly at what they'd been avoiding all season. Because the truth is, Shedeur didn't change. He didn't suddenly become this version of himself. He didn't wait to turn into a leader. He was one the second he stepped through those facility doors. The Browns just couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. And so, week after week, the reps went elsewhere. The trust went elsewhere. The offense sputtered, the depth chart held, and Shedeur kept doing what he does best, preparing for a moment that never came. Until it had to. And when it did, it didn't just shine a light on the talent that had been sitting on the bench. It blew up the whole myth that he wasn't ready. Because the second he got on the field, it wasn't just about performance. It was about presence. It was the way the team rallied around him. The way the game slowed down under his control. The way the offense found its rhythm for the first time in what felt like the entire season. Suddenly, the rookie project label didn't make sense anymore. Suddenly, all those questions about readiness and development time sounded ridiculous. Because this wasn't a young guy trying to find his footing, this was a quarterback who had already built it. And it wasn't just physical execution that proved it. It was the poise, the timing, the way he ran the offense with the confidence of someone who'd been quietly waiting to show the world what he already knew. That's the thing about Shedeur Sanders, he doesn't ask for the spotlight. He earns it. And when it finally came, he didn't blink. He didn't play tentative. He didn't try to be flashy. He played clean, smart, sure. Every drive had direction. Every call had confidence. Every rep confirmed what his teammates had already believed, long before the coaching staff caught on. And that is what made this moment so frustrating, because it never had to come to this. The Browns had every opportunity to recognize his leadership. They had the film. They had the locker room feedback. They had the chance to build around a quarterback with exceptional mental maturity, faith, and internal discipline. But they waited. They chose veterans who couldn't deliver. They doubled down on mistakes instead of reevaluating the moment. And in doing so, they didn't just stall Shedeur's growth, they slowed down their own success. Because the second they finally handed him the reins, the entire tone of the offense changed. The playbook came alive. The team found balance. The instability that had plagued them through the first stretch of the season? Gone. Replaced by a calm, confident leader who never needed a full support system to perform. He was the support system. He stayed ready even when the reps weren't there. He kept visualizing success while being sidelined. He studied, prayed, and stayed locked in while other players in his position might have tuned out, coasted, or cracked under the weight of neglect. But Shedeur Sanders doesn't operate like other players. And the Browns are finally learning that the hard way. Because every game he starts now is a reminder of what could have been. Of how early season losses might have looked different with him under center. Of how much sooner this team could have stabilized, found rhythm, and, frankly, looked competent. And that sting? It doesn't go away. Because when you're a front office or coaching staff who spent months talking about waiting for the right time, only to realize you missed the actual right time, you don't get to hide behind excuses. They failed to recognize leadership because they weren't looking for it in the right places. They were scouting based on archetypes, checklists, draft slots. And what they weren't prepared for was a quarterback who brought maturity without mileage. A rookie who didn't need to be coddled or controlled, just trusted. That trust came too late, but at least it finally came. And now that it has, Shedeur is doing what he always said he would, proving them wrong by proving himself right. It's not just his play on the field that's setting him apart, it's the ripple effect. The way he shifted team culture. The way veterans have responded. The way younger players are suddenly playing with more focus, more urgency, more belief. He didn't show up to be anyone's backup plan. He came to lead. And even when the organization tried to shove him into the background, he kept walking toward that role until there was nowhere else to go but forward. And now the Browns have a decision to make. Do they keep trying to frame this as a pleasant surprise, or do they own the fact that they almost blew it? Because let's be clear, Shedeur's emergence is not some heartwarming underdog story. It's a correction. It's the team finally admitting that what they'd overlooked wasn't invisible, it was inconvenient. And once it became impossible to ignore, the story wrote itself. It's not just a rookie quarterback playing well. He's a walking, talking reminder that the old rules don't apply anymore. That draft order doesn't equal readiness. That leadership isn't something you ease into, it's something you embody from the start. And what he's doing now is not just rare. It's redefining what front offices should be looking for. Because if mental resilience, emotional intelligence, and inner conviction aren't on your scouting checklist, they should be. Because those are the things that carried Shedeur through this mess. Those are the traits that allowed him to thrive despite being underdeveloped, undervalued, and underutilized. And now that he's here, there's no going back. This is his offense. His locker room. His moment. And he's not letting it slip. Not because he has something to prove, but because he already proved it long before anyone gave him credit. That confrontation with the coaching staff? That wasn't a tantrum. It was a turning point. And everything that's happened since has made one thing clear. Shedeur Sanders was never too early. The Browns were just too late. At this point, anyone still calling Shedeur Sanders a developmental project either hasn't been watching, or they're just too stubborn to admit they were wrong. Because the numbers? They're fine. The tape? Even better. But what really matters here isn't what shows up in the box score, it's everything else. It's the way the offense breathes when he's under center. It's the shift in confidence, in rhythm, in belief. It's how this entire team feels different the second Shedeur walks into the huddle. You can't coach that. You can't manufacture it. And you definitely can't fake it. That kind of leadership doesn't come from being handed the job. It comes from earning it over and over, in a system that refused to acknowledge your worth until there was no other option. Let's be real, Shedeur's presence is exposing more than just mismanagement. It's pulling back the curtain on how much talent gets overlooked in this league simply because it doesn't check the traditional boxes. He's not loud. He's not flashy. He's not dripping in draft day hype. But what he is ready. Mentally sharp. Faith-driven. Composed under pressure. The kind of quarterback who doesn't rise to the moment, he stays there. And that's what makes this story so infuriating. Because none of this should be a surprise. Shedeur didn't just become a leader when he got the call. He was already carrying himself like the starter weeks ago, long before the coaching staff caught up. He was preparing like a pro, encouraging teammates, taking mental reps while other guys were still figuring out what day it was. He didn't wait for opportunity to knock. He built the door and stood in front of it until they had no choice but to open it. And when he finally walked through, everything changed. Not just for the offense, not just for the Browns, but for the entire conversation about what makes a quarterback NFL ready. Because if this league is serious about evolving, it better start rethinking what it values. Draft position might tell you where someone starts, but it tells you nothing about how they'll finish. And Shedeur Sanders? He's just getting started. Let's not forget how we got here. The Browns spent the early part of the season stumbling over their own inconsistency. Quarterback play was shaky. The offense looked disjointed. Chemistry was missing. Trust was low. And while all of that unfolded, the most composed player on the roster was standing on the sideline, fully prepared and barely acknowledged. A fifth-round pick with a starter's mindset. A rookie showing more emotional maturity than some of the coaches. And yet, no real reps. No shot. No accountability from the organization that drafted him and then seemed to forget why. So when he finally stepped forward and said calmly but firmly that he needed to be considered for the starting job, he wasn't being emotional. He was being factual. Because the facts were on his side. The preparation was there. The leadership was there. The respect from his teammates was already locked in. The only thing missing was trust from the staff, and it took a confrontation to get it. But what a turning point that was. Because since that moment, the Browns have looked like a different team. Not just on the field but in the locker room. In the way they carry themselves. In the belief they finally seem to have in one another. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's leadership, and it's been sitting right in front of them the whole time. Shedeur isn't winning games with trick plays or heroic scrambles. He's doing it with presence, with steadiness, with decisions that keep drives alive and mistakes that don't repeat themselves. That's how you build trust as a quarterback. That's how you become the guy in a locker room full of grown men who aren't interested in hype. They want results. And that's exactly what he's delivering. The contrast is brutal. Watching what Shedeur's doing now only highlights how badly the Browns misjudged this situation from the start. How many weeks of instability they sat through while the answer was wearing a jersey on the sideline. How much earlier the offense could have settled, the locker room could have rallied, the team could have found its identity. But no. They waited. They clung to outdated timelines and rigid hierarchies. They assumed that a rookie, especially a fifth-rounder, couldn't possibly be the most prepared player on the roster. And yet here we are. And Shedeur? He's not just stepping up. He's undoing the narrative that's been attached to him since draft day. Because let's be honest, he wasn't supposed to be the guy. Not this soon. Not this steady. Not this clean. The system was built to delay him. The team culture wasn't designed to prioritize his growth. And the infrastructure? It barely supported his development. But that's the thing about Shedeur. He didn't need perfect conditions. He built his own discipline. He grounded himself in his routine. He leaned on faith, visualization, and repetition. He led without being asked. And now, he's succeeding in spite of the dysfunction that tried to hold him back. That's not just impressive, it's elite. Because it's one thing to thrive with full support. It's another thing entirely to grow through neglect, to stay composed through oversight, and to lead through adversity. That's what Shedeur Sanders is doing. And he's doing it every single week, without drama, without excuses, without flinching. And now, the Browns have to live with the reality that they nearly let it all slip away. They nearly wasted a player who had everything they needed, not because he lacked talent but because they lacked vision. And still, Shedeur's not bitter. He's not gloating. He's not seeking revenge or playing the blame game. He's simply doing what he's always done. Showing up, leading by example, and delivering under pressure. That's who he is. And if Cleveland's smart, they'll start building around him, not just relying on him. Because leaders like this don't come along often. And when they do, you don't slow them down, you get out of their way. The truth is, this isn't just a quarterback story anymore. This is about how leadership forces its way to the front. How real, grounded, resilient leadership breaks through walls that were built to keep it out. And that's what Shedeur Sanders is doing. Not just playing well but forcing a system to reevaluate what it rewards and what it punishes. Because let's not sugarcoat it, he was punished for not fitting the mold. 5th round pick. Rookie. Too poised, not loud enough. Too composed, not flashy enough. And because he didn't demand attention in the way the league expects, they assumed he didn't need it. But he did. He needed trust. He needed opportunity. He needed the same leash that other quarterbacks with less maturity and less preparation were handed on day one. And he didn't get it, not until he made it impossible to ignore him. And when that moment came, he didn't spike the ball. He didn't dance on anyone's grave. He just did what he's always done, stepped in, stayed grounded, and made everything around him better. That's what leadership is. It's not volume. It's value. And Shedeur has brought that kind of value to a franchise that desperately needed it. Because let's be honest, the Browns have seen plenty of quarterbacks. They've chased talent. They've drafted hype. They've rolled the dice on names with potential. But this is different. This isn't about raw talent. This is about readiness. About a player who isn't just capable but calmly capable. Who walks into chaos and doesn't flinch. Who leads not with ego but with clarity. And maybe that's what Cleveland's been missing this whole time. Now they've got it. And they better hold on to it. Because what Shedeur Sanders is doing goes beyond plays and stats and wins. He's reminding the league that greatness doesn't always scream when it enters the room. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it prepares. Sometimes it watches you sleep on it, until it has no choice but to wake you up. And now, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to business as usual. You can't put Shedeur back in the box the league tried to keep him in. He's out. He's here. And he's exactly what this team needed, just in time. If you've been feeling this shift, if you've seen what Shedeur's brought to Cleveland, drop a like, share it with someone who didn't believe, and leave a comment below. Because this story? It's far from over. They didn't see him coming. Now they're building around him. And he's just getting started.